Just want to check that everybody can hear me in live stream land. You can.
I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. So if somebody in the chat on the live stream can just confirm that you can hear me, that would be awesome. Just want to make sure.
I can hear you.
Well, I can hear you too, Mark. So if somebody in the chat on the live stream can just confirm that you can hear me, that would be awesome. Just want to make sure. Well, I can hear you too, Mark. So if somebody in the chat on the live stream can confirm. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Kathy.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You look great. I like your hair. It looks different.
Thank you. This is how I control the frizz and the pandemic grow out.
I was going to say the same thing. I like your hair. It stands out.
I might start doing this.
So Colleen, how many people do we have joining us now?
We have some of the senators are still coming in.
Okay, so maybe we should give it a.
We're at 49 right now.
Okay,
so
yeah, we should wait a couple minutes, I think. That 49 includes everyone, right? Senators and non-senators.
49 everybody. So
yeah,
have
we should
some
probably wait
proxies
a couple minutes.
and additional.
Sure.
I'm checking email too. Some people are asking for invites.
Okay, yeah.
I think we're good.
Well, do you think we're ready to get started?
Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just check my email, make sure there's no. All right, one more. Yep. I got a senator who can't get in. Let me get them in really quick. Okay. Too many windows. All right, so we have 66 participants. I think I can just get any stragglers in on the roll as they come in because I see their name. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome to the November 13th Faculty Senate meeting. We'll go ahead and get started by calling the meeting to order. We should have a lighter agenda today than we did last month, which I'm sure will be a relief to everyone. Though, as I mentioned in the email that I sent out yesterday, at the end of this meeting, we'll have an important presentation that I'll say more about right before we call David Nickel to the floor. But before then, we have a number of curriculum changes that we will be voting on. As we go through this meeting, keep in mind the protocols we talked about last meeting regarding if you would like to speak, please do so first by using the raised hand feature. I'll try to keep an eye on that. Colleen will probably be even better about keeping an eye on that than I am, but we'll try to make sure that we recognize you. And if you can avoid using the chat, except for anything that involves direct communication with Colleen or with myself, that would be good. In other words, the chat should not be used as a forum for general discussion. That should take place through the raised hand feature so that we can be sure to get important comments in the minutes and recorded for everyone to see on the live stream as well. One quick agenda modification that I will request, if there are no objections, Provost David Jenks has asked to move his speaking time to 1:15 p.m. And in order to accommodate his schedule today with other meetings, I would support that change when he requested it. And so if there are no objections, I'd like to move administrators' reports, which will just be one administrator report today, to near the beginning of the agenda. If you have an objection, voice it. Otherwise, we'll proceed with the slight agenda modification. If there's nothing else, let's go to the roll call. Colleen.
Right. If you will indicate that you're here by voice, that would be awesome. Banford,
Here.
Barber,
Here.
Barrett,
Here.
Boumanier,
Here.
Branyan,
Here.
Chong,
Here.
Corley,
Here.
Deweese,
Here.
Elman,
Here.
Urban,
Here.
Fawcett,
Here.
Fuentes,
Here.
Galt,
Here.
Geyer,
Here.
Gordon,
Here.
Graffius,
Here.
Green,
Here.
Gupta,
Here.
Hadley,
Here.
Hanson,
Here.
Hill,
Here.
Hodges,
Here.
Ivory,
Here.
Harapasmino,
Here.
Hellison,
Here.
Kimbrell,
Here.
Niece.
Here.
Anka said she's here. She's having some technical difficulties. So I've got you, Anka. Kramer,
Here.
Lu Yan Voon,
Here.
Lee, Lee, McKinnon,
Here.
Mbai,
Here.
McKendry Smith,
Here.
McLean,
Here.
Nickel,
Here.
Ogletree,
Here.
Cook for Pasha,
Here.
Hazani,
Here.
Reese,
Here.
Richter,
Here.
Self,
Here.
Scullin,
Here.
Snipes,
Here.
Sterling,
Here.
Swift,
Here.
Tawidi, Tawidi, Van Valen,
Here.
Volkert,
Here.
Wadlington,
Here.
Wofford. Wofford. All right, we're go.
Very good. Well, let's start with the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes that the executive secretary provided?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. All in favor say aye. Or
Aye.
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 okay, sorry, we have to pull.
All right, I have to launch the poll or I can't get to the next one.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. I'm sorry. Sorry for the confusion there.
All right, they're approved.
Okay, very good. Well, excellent. Okay. This is going to be a little unorthodox in that I think we're going to need to start with the committee reports and then switch back to the provost report. I assume David Jenks is not yet in on the call. Is that correct?
I have not seen him.
Okay.
Let me do a scan. He's not yet here.
Okay. Okay, well, let's proceed with the agenda, and when he joins, if I don't notice it, you can flag me. So we'll start with Rosemary Kellison, Chair of UPC. You have a number of action items to present. I think the first one has to do with the interdisciplinary certification musical theater, I think.
Yes, hello. So we're going to start with this item from CACSI. This is for a modification to the interdisciplinary certificate in musical theater. The request is to change the certificate from an embedded certificate to a standalone certificate, which will make the certificate open to students who are not majoring in music or dance.
Music or theater.
Okay.
Yes,
It's
Thank
theater,
you.
not dance.
I apologize. Thanks for that, Shelley.
Okay. Well, if there is no discussion, if there is a discussion, someone can flag it with a raised hand. Otherwise, I think we're probably ready to proceed to a vote. So Colleen, you can launch the poll.
All right. There we go.
Okay, so the question is, do you approve the proposed modifications to the standalone interdisciplinary certification in musical theater? Yes, no, or I abstain. And as soon as we have a quorum of votes, Colleen will announce the vote total or show us the vote total.
Passes.
Excellent. Okay. Next agenda item is also with Rosemary. We have two proposed modifications from the College of Education, which I assume will be taken as a group.
Actually, these are going to be separate items. They're coming from separate departments.
Okay, we'll take them separately. So first one, speech language pathology.
Yes, that's right. So this is a modification to the BSED in speech language pathology, and it is changing the minimum GPA admission requirement from its current requirement of a 3.25 to a 3.0. This is reflecting the fact that there's now a professional pathway for students earning only this degree, not going on to graduate school.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing no raised hands, I think we're probably ready to proceed to a vote on that. So once again, Colleen will launch the poll. Question is, do you approve the proposed modifications to the speech language pathology BSED? Yes, no, or abstain?
Passes.
Excellent. Okay. And then the last proposal from the UPC is the nutrition promotion and education minor request for modification. Rosemary.
Yes, so the change to this minor is a modification to add 2 new courses to the list of approved courses for the minor. So the 2 new courses are History 4580, American Foodways, and Nutrition 4300, Cultural Aspects of Food and Nutrition.
Very good. I don't see any raised hands, so I'll assume there are no questions or discussion on this item either. We're probably ready to proceed to a vote. So once again, a poll will soon appear on your screen. And the question is, do you approve the proposed modifications to the nutrition promotion and education minor, the 2 courses that Rosemary mentioned?
Passes.
Excellent. Okay, we'll go to GPC with Connie. You have, I think, a proposal for a standalone certificate in online teaching.
Correct. So this is from the Department of Education Technology and Foundations. They're requesting to add a standalone certificate in online teaching. This department provides practicing K through 12 individuals as well as those in higher education and corporations. So they felt that endorsements in online teaching for practicing teachers through the Georgia Professional Standards Commission would help not only practicing teachers, but it would benefit for people in the industry to earn a certificate in online teaching. And they do have a minimum GPA requirement of 2.7.
Okay, very good. Well, I don't see any raised hands, so I'll assume people are ready to go to a vote on this. So we'll have once again, an online poll. Do you approve the proposed modifications to the standalone certificate in online teaching?
Passes.
Very good. Okay, so I think the next agenda item is also yours, Connie, the speech language pathology MED.
Correct. So they're asking to modify their post-baccalaureate speech language pathology prerequisite coursework. And several of these are to have prerequisites that are equivalent, coursework or equivalent in speech and language acquisition or language development, phonetics, anatomy and physiology of speech and hearing, audiology, 3 additional speech language courses. The reason that it's being a voted item is because they want these courses to have a minimum GPA earned of an A or B or higher. So, I mean, not higher than an A, but an A or a B. Since that is, even though these are prerequisite courses, since it's a requirement for the program, this is an item to be voted on.
Very good. Well, once again, I don't see any raised hands, so I assume people are ready to vote. Do you approve the proposed modifications to the speech language pathology MED?
Passes.
Thank you. And Connie, I think you have 2 information items to share from your committee.
Correct. So the Department of Early Childhood through Secondary Education, again, is asking for, or not again, they're asking for a change in admission requirements. They're requiring 3 years of teaching experience in elementary grades at the T5 master's level for admission into the program. They're requiring prospective candidates to have understanding and skills necessary for teaching children in grades P through 5. They're requesting this to be active summer 2021 admission, but it was actually, I realized I don't have it correct. It was changed to fall 2021. So these admission requirements will apply to fall 2021 because they're already starting to take admissions for the summer. They're additionally adding a 0 credit hour course, ECED 88,200 oral comprehensive exam. The course will provide a course and shell for information to disseminate to the students, and they're replacing ECED 8284 research seminar with EDRS 8301 educational research design and EDRS 8304 data analysis in educational research with EDRS 8302 educated research theory and practice. So that was just all information items for a change in their specialist degree. And then the last one is, again, a change in admission requirements for special education EDS. And they are changing their guidelines, admission guidelines, to have a cumulative 3.5 out of 4 grade point average or higher. to, I guess it was currently 3.5, sorry, and they're changing it to 3.2. They're deleting take part in an interview, so they're deleting the interview. And they're adding a document, 2 or more years of successful experience as a special education teacher, collaborative teacher working directly with students with disabilities or speech language pathology in a school setting. They're changing the prerequisite criteria from 4 courses to 2 courses if students don't have a master's in special ed, and they're going to offer additional courses that can serve as prerequisites. And so they're modifying that list of prerequisites to include, all of them are SPED, so 6701, 6709, 6715, 6721, 6766, 6776, and then they're going to have all out-of-state students must verify their local certification agency. And let's see, and I think that's it. It was just 7 of them, 7 points, changing to the admission criteria.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you, Connie. Well, I see that Dr. Jenks has joined us and probably has, it looks like, the most fascinating background image of any of us on this call, as far as I can tell. Dr. Jenks, I know your time is short today, since you were, I guess, balancing a number of competing meetings. I'd like to, I guess, give you the floor if you're ready, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, my apologies for jumping in I'm actually on break from another meeting that was scheduled by the system office. So, but they give us a 15-minute break, which is plenty of time. But I was speaking with Dan, I believe it was Tuesday, in a meeting, and it was right before the Board of Regents meeting. For any of you that saw it, Tristan Denley did a presentation on a new process that was being proposed for program proposal. They're updating the one-step prospectus again. What is going to be different this time is essentially they're recommending, it's a guideline at this point. We didn't know if they were going to mandate the review in front or if they were just going to recommend. And they went with recommend, which gives us a lot of leeway and a lot of time to work on it. How we want to address this as a group and how you all want to address this as a faculty. Essentially, what we do now is for a program, department faculty get together, they say, hey, let's put together a minor, a nexus, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a PhD in any way, shape, or form. And then they connect with the academic affairs liaison in the provost office. We'll give them the one-step proposal. We'll draft a program. It goes through UPC, GPC, APC, whatever other meetings are necessary for the faculty senate. The registrar looks at it to make sure that there are no violations in prefixes. Assessment looks at it. The SACS liaison will look at it, make sure there's no issues there with SACS. And then it comes forward to our office to work with the board to get on the board agenda. That has been seamless in some cases, and in others we hold it up when it gets to our office, because we send it over to the board office and say, this is the program that's being proposed. And they ask questions, and then there's always some question as to whether or not the Board of Regents is going to approve it, or whether it's going to make it onto agenda. If there's other things in the state that are going on at the same time, you don't want to propose, they don't want to take 6 programs in the exact same thing to the Board of Regents during the same academic year, because it looks like we're just competing against ourselves for students in the same type of area. So what they're proposing is now to add some fields to that program prospectus that include links directly to the workforce, job outcomes, support from corporations and other employers for that particular field, suggested or not suggested, average salary for people who work in those areas, and they're providing resources to collect all that data. So moving forward, and it probably won't take effect until next year, we'll have a review up front when faculty have an idea, and we can actually connect with the folks at the board office to answer any questions that they have and actually work that into the proposal. Now, I don't know if that would have to sit with the UPC and the GPC, or if that would just be some kind of new committee or structure in which we review new programs for proposal before departments and faculty put a lot of work into a proposal, only to find that it may or may not be forwarded to the board and approved in any kind of timely manner. So it actually protects us from doing a lot of work that's not going to come to fruition. And it also helps, from their perspective, manage the types of programs that are being sent at any given time. There will be more about this. His presentation was very short. It's available on the USG's website. I think there's 4 slides as to how those changes are going to be implemented. But as a group, I know it was publicly broadcast, but sometimes things slip through the board meetings that don't get brought to the faculty. And it seemed like good timing, since they were in the same week, to go ahead and present you with that information and just give you a heads up that this is something that we'll probably be revisiting in the spring. And you will all be revisiting in the spring with Drs. Preston and Drake. Any questions on that?
Yeah, just to make sure people know what this is, I suspect there will be some Senate questions, because the proposal is that there are a number of new programs that require board approval. I think we all know that. And traditionally, those have gone through UPC or GPC, then they've gone up through the Senate. Senate has voted on them. Then they go through the provost's office, president's office, and then they're sent to the board. Only in some cases, either to be tabled or to be rejected. And some of you in on this call, I think, have had personal experience with that. So the proposal is that there would be a new curriculum committee that would communicate directly to the board before the Senate becomes involved. That is, faculty would deal directly with the curriculum committee. They would get a tentative green light from the board, and then this would go through the regular process through the Senate, and then back to the provost's office. We'd probably try to streamline that process, but it would go through the curriculum committee first. So the issues involved would be on the pro side. One is, as you said, the board has recommended this. It would probably improve the chances for programs to be approved. The area where the Senate may have questions, I would assume, would be, while it doesn't take the Senate out of the process, it gives the Senate a secondary role in a process in which it's traditionally had a primary role. This may be something that would need to be discussed further to really get a sense of the Senate, but, and of course, we're not deciding it today. Dr. Jinks is not deciding it today, but are there any questions that you would like to ask directly to Dr. Jinks? I mean, if we take this up later for consideration, obviously we could talk about it at length, but we wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to ask those direct questions of the interim provost right now. Any questions anyone wants to ask? I don't see any hands, so I assume not. You can, okay. Oh, I know you have to run back to your meeting. Would you be willing to say something briefly about scheduling, because for the spring, because I've received some questions from faculty regarding, I guess, what we're doing. I think you generally said what we're doing, but also the rationale behind it, why there's a push for in-person classes. Of course, that comes from the USG, and the length of the semester, even the questions about spring break. If you could just kind of briefly bring everyone up to speed with that, I think some people may appreciate it.
Sure. You're exactly right. The push for in-person instruction was directly from the USG. and in response to what they have found as student demand for in-person classes. The result of that push, while maintaining social distancing on campus, is we'll have an increase in face-to-face classes through the spring semester, but they will be spread out over a wider range of times than we would normally see. And that's largely because the spaces that we have to operate in are very limited. Pretty much most of the classrooms in the academic quad, Boyd, Humanities, and Pafford are not usable for much other than very, very small groups. I think their social distancing capacity is around 5 or 6 or 7 in some of them. We will be using the larger lecture halls and spreading folks out. And the schedule will be more evenly distributed from our typical 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Thursday to a more 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. Most of those schedule changes were the result of requests, and thank you all for volunteering to move things into different areas and different times to maintain certain days. That helped dramatically. Whitney Brand put the vast majority of these together, and it was an enormous puzzle. And of course, with any semester, there are still some moving parts, but all of those classes, I think, have been listed with the exception of a very few. We didn't have to engage too much with Saturday classes other than what's already been scheduled. But we did activate several areas that are not traditional classrooms, including the lower level of Z6, the HPE gym, and the fitness centers, and the campus center ballroom in the campus center. We are still working through the logistics of technology and seating for those areas, but the team that's working on them has pretty good confidence that they will be up and running. If you do encounter any issues, absolutely let us know, and we'll pass those along. The spring schedule, what was it, spring break? We had a long conversation about spring break and engaged several stakeholders among faculty, staff, and students. We considered an online final similar to what we're doing this fall. That was discouraged, very much so, from switching back to an online format. And that's, again, the push to keep everything in person. We looked at shortening the schedule, but we would have had to adjust our entire time schedule. I think it was Georgia State had a shorter spring semester than we have, but that's because their class periods are longer. If we had to extend class periods, we would have limited the number of classes that we can offer and the limited number of rooms that we have. So we maintained the spring schedule as it stands, essentially to meet that demand. There are still, I think, several AWA requirements and requests that still need to be balanced, but those are being handled by the appropriate offices on campus, primarily HR and health services. So is that a good summation, Dan?
Yes, thank you. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your willingness to be here today. I've appreciated over the last 2 months the opportunities to have a lot of conversations with you. The fact that I think you've really tried hard to bring information to the Senate's attention that needed to be brought, and I've very much appreciated your time here. So thank you. I know this is the final meeting in which you will appear in this role before the Faculty Senate. So I wanted to thank you and very much appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you all. Our work over the last 20 months has been enlightening. And I know I've worked with a lot of you personally, and I truly appreciate all of the efforts that the faculty have engaged in over, all of the trials and tribulations we have seen, not just in the last 9 months, but last year was no picnic either. And I do appreciate all the work that you all have put in. Your feedback is always welcome, and was incredibly helpful in navigating all of the things that we dealt with. So thank you as well. And, have a good afternoon. I'm going to switch back into my other meeting and let you get back to your work and enjoy your weekends. Thank you all.
Very good. Thanks. Okay. Kale Self, I think. Kale, you're doing the IPC, Institutional Planning Committee. You have a couple of information items for us, I think.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. Happy Friday, everybody. I just want to let everybody know that IPC has met with the ex officio members from the provost's office and with Nadia Williams, who was in charge of the last QEP for what the last decade. Is that about how long that's taken to to kind of come to fruition? And so I just have a couple of kind of bows to tie on this thing, I guess. So for our SAC COC, our 5-year compliance report was accepted with no issues at all in terms of academic related standards, which is a very wonderful thing. Everything is available on the SAC COC portion of the website, with the lone exception of the impact report, which Kathy Jenks said would go up very soon, so you can look for that. The same thing for the QEP. The QEP was accepted with no issues. And going forward, we're going to start looking at we have to have another QEP going forward. It's a part of that SAC COC, and there's a whole section of the website that's dedicated to that you can look for. So the dates coming up, September 2023 is the due date for our next SAC COC review. And I believe I just met with Kathy a couple days ago about this, that spring 2024 is when the implementation of our new QEP is going to go into effect. So we're kind of on the next year, several years up until that point are kind of the development phase of whatever our new QEP is going to be. And then starting in spring 2024, I guess fall 2024 would be when we're implementing it. And then it would be, 5 years after that when we're at the point where we're at now. So IPC is going to start talking about that in January, hopefully. We'll certainly talk with Dr. Preston, the new provost, who I'm certain will want to find someone who's going to head up the QEP like Nadia did for this last one. So anyways, there's those are both very good news. The other thing that I wanted to update you on, the other information item, is the other part of IPC's charge is to, quote, monitor the implementation of the university strategic plan. So we have been working very hard on that this fall, and we have just this week, Beth Shepard and I from the committee both served as part of the team that met for 4 hours this week. So it was 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours yesterday. That was on basically the next stage of the strategic planning process, which was called the prioritization phase. So basically it was taking the massive amount of work that the steering committee did in taking all of the information from the discovery sessions and from those surveys, and then they streamlined that into 8 different themes that appeared out of everybody's, and I think it was 1,300 different people that contributed to all of that information, I think is what they said yesterday. So they kind of narrowed that into 8 themes, and then we divided up into groups, and we're talking about each one of those themes, and then that is going to kind of prioritize that going forward into the next stage of the process. So just wanted to let you know that IPC is a part of that process, has been included in the strategic planning process. So faculty, Senate, and the faculty are being represented in the strategic planning process now and going forward. And that's it.
Very good. Well, thank you, Kale.
Yep.
Well, we'll turn to another important item. It's also an information item, which is on the budget timeline. Lori Kimbrell.
Hey, everybody. So the budget timeline is uploaded to the agenda. There it is. And just a little bit of background, the budget committee is working hard, and we've just approved our own goals for this year that include defining and commemorating that definition of what it means to have an advisory capacity, and also what specific points along the way during budget development during typical year budget development and emergency budget development. Do we have that advisory role, and how does that look? So again, just for your information, here's the timeline for this year. We are already past an important, if you can scroll down a little bit, Colleen, an important date, and that's this the renewal of the intent to renew non-tenured faculty members, the November surprise last year. We are past that date. And the good news is David Jenks let the budget committee know that there are no budget related non-renewals planned for this year at all. So at this point, the only plans for non-renewals are for personnel related issues, not budget related issues. So I put all of these timelines in here for your information. But again, the information we have at this point is there won't be any budget related letters being sent. So that's good news. So more when we have it, but that's all for today.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Lori. And I don't see any questions regarding the budget either. So we will go to the last of our information items, which is from Angie Branyan, Chair of the Rules Committee, who's going to tell us about the full-time faculty census, something that happens every 10 years, and that the Rules Committee has spent already a number of hours during the past month working on. Angie?
Hello, everybody. We have sat down and discussed several different pathways to reapportion the Senate representation. A initial draft of a new plan was sent to everyone on the Rules Committee today for them to take back to their departments and their colleges to look at and talk about. And we're planning to have another meeting on December 1st to look at what the input is from all of the different colleges, departments, and programs, and have something ready to submit to the Senate by January that will reapportion the senators. Just kind of wanted to let you know where we were in the process. Still lots of questions we're trying to figure out, but I think we do have a list now of the questions we've got to answer, which is a big step. Once you know all the issues you've got to deal with, then you can go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Yes, the faculty census is not an easy job, and so I commend the Rules Committee for their willingness to work above and beyond the normal call of duty on a committee that is holding extra meetings in order to try to accomplish this large task on very short notice. So thank you. Well, we do not have any old business scheduled. I'll open the call if anyone has old business that was supposed to be on the agenda that was not. You're welcome to let me flag it now and introduce it. Otherwise, we'll go to new business. We also don't have any new business scheduled. And but is there anyone that wants to introduce new business? Otherwise, we'll go to David Nichols' presentation. Let me just say a couple words about David Nichols' presentation before he gives it. You might wonder, why are we devoting an hour plus time in this meeting to a presentation? The answer to that is that David Nichols is a faculty senator here, so he's a member of this group. And earlier this year, he completed a rather large-scale study of recruitment and enrollment patterns. It was essentially a marketing survey of regional high school students' preferences in terms of college applications, with the goal of trying to figure out how can UWG better position itself for improving enrollment and recruitment. He then gave the presentation to the administration. Both Dr. Kelly and Dr. Jenks were very impressed with that presentation. I was informed by Dr. Kelly this week that that Dr. Nichols' research has already reshaped how the university is approaching these issues. They made some changes this summer in response to David's research findings, though they plan to make some further changes in the near future over the coming months. And so I think in order to understand where we are as a university today and how the administration views these issues, I thought it would be useful to hear the full scale version of David Nichols' presentation. I should mention, and David wanted me to I guess reconsider a couple things that I said in the email on this yesterday, that David, of course, is not part of the administration at UWG. He doesn't speak for the administration. To the extent that the administration has adopted some of his proposals, has acted on some of his recommendations, that's really been entirely independent of David's own decisions. And so he wanted to make clear that he's not speaking for the administration. He's not going to tell us what the UWG administration's particular thinking is in regard to any of these things. But nevertheless, I think that when we see the full presentation of his data, we'll have a much greater understanding of the thinking that has gone into enrollment and recruitment at UWG, including most importantly among administrators who've been having a lot of conversations about enrollment issues for some time. So we're going to listen to David's presentation. He's informed me it takes about 45 minutes to an hour, I think, and he can certainly have that full time. And then we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. And then after that, of course, we'll move to adjournment. So David, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Dan. I'm going to pull up my screen now. I hope I do this correctly. So I'm hopeful everyone can see this. If not, please let me know. So just to give you some background, how did I get here? I was appointed last year in December to the enrollment committee. I was a Senate rep to that, and some of you may remember that. And so while I was on that committee, I really wanted to understand what was going on with enrollment and what we were doing, and see if I could be of any help or assistance in that. So I worked very closely with admissions and with UCM to really understand what was happening, what was the current status of enrollment. At that time, that's about when Dr. Kelly arrived on campus. So I had been talking to Dr. Jenks and then subsequently to Dr. Kelly about, I think we need to do a market research study to really understand what incoming or potential incoming students are thinking, why they select colleges, what goes into that process, and what they think about us. So I conducted this study over the summer. I gave my final presentation to the administration in August, and that is pretty much what I'm going to share with you today, the same presentation with a couple of minor adjustments. So with that, I wanted to answer three questions. What segments of prospective students are good fits for us, but they're not considering us? Can we identify and target these potential students? And what attributes of UWG should we highlight to gain their interest? So the way I constructed this survey was I did a conjoint study, and I'll explain what that is in a minute if you don't know what it is. I asked students and their parents, and these are two different groups, to identify their preferred colleges and then rank them. I asked them what attributes were important to them in choosing a school, and then how was each of, how were we and some other schools doing on those attributes? And then I asked some basic demographic questions. So what we did is we talked to students who are currently in Alabama and Georgia. We screened out by those who identified as being likely or very likely to attend college within the next 4 years. I worked a lot with admissions in UCM, and I worked a lot with Dr. Sethna for background and insights. Really, what are we doing now? What have we done? What kind of questions should we ask? What kind of school should we ask about? And then I did, the traditional literature review to understand what other studies have been done in this area. We put together the questionnaire, and I pre-tested that with some students here on campus. They came from RCOB, the Dean's Council, and then with student assistants within the admissions office, just to make sure that the questionnaire was working, that it made sense. And then we collected data, 2 independent samples, 1 sample of high school students. These were sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And we got 948 completes from them. And then we talked to parents of high school students, not the parents of these students necessarily. These were independent studies. And we had 990 responses for that. And again, what we screened for was the likelihood to attend college and if they lived in Alabama or Georgia. And we went through Qualtrics to get the sample for this. So really at a high level, let me explain what a conjoint study is if you don't understand, but it, in essence, it's a trade-off study. And if you look on the right here, this is an illustrative example, but in essence, we give respondents a series of options to choose from. And if these were your only options, which one of these schools would you prefer? The reason we did this was to get an idea of what attributes were really driving decisions. To give you an example, for instance, if I ask you how many cup holders are important for you in a new car, you may say, look, I've got to have 4 cup holders, but are the number of cup holders really driving your decision on what car to buy? And so I wanted to get a sense of what was driving decisions and really to assign a utility to that. In talking with admissions, they felt these were the schools that were really our competition and our competitive set. Now you'll notice that there's not a UGA or Georgia Tech or Auburn or Alabama. The thinking is if students were considering those schools, we weren't really necessarily competing for them. That was a separate segment of students. So our emphasis was on these schools. Okay, so let me talk about where things stand as of now and as of this summer. And the next slide, this one is one I just put in yesterday. I got this from the admissions office, and I want to give you guys a sense of what the numbers are and have been. So if you look at this, the second column here is current high school graduates from Georgia universities, or Georgia high schools. The next column, the actual UWG, that's been our enrollment of incoming or new freshmen over the last few years. The next column, and the one that I'm particularly interested in, is this percent. In essence, this is actual UWG divided by high school grads, or what percentage of the Georgia market have we been getting? And what really concerned me is this very large drop off from 2018 to 2019. Now, that's when we first had these budget issues. And that's really what got me involved in trying to understand what's going on. As you can see here, enrollment, high school graduates have gone up. Our enrollment has gone down, our percentage. Now, why did that happen? And we're still trying to figure that out, and we being the admissions office, and I've been talking to them about that. My presentation will give some thoughts to that, but where did these 400 plus students go? The thinking right now is Kennesaw State, and to some extent, Georgia State. They became a bit more aggressive in their marketing and positioning, and it just reached a crescendo at that point. And so pretty much our entire loss went to Kennesaw State. Now, let me get back to my stuff. So, I asked respondents to select and rank in order of preference of five schools, or up to 5 schools they were considering. And this is what we found. Georgia State is by far the largest school getting students, and this is down in order. Now, the way I've done this is I've also got these ranks. So the darker the bar on these charts, the higher the preference. So the darkest red is Georgia State was their first choice, then the second choice, third, fourth, and fifth. We are down here in the middle right now. That's about 13%, 12 or 13%. I'm going to come back to this later, this number right here, or how many were their first choice. I'll talk about that later. But as you can see, we're kind of in the middle of the pack here, but there certainly seems to be a shift upwards towards the Georgia States, the Kennesaws, the Georgia Southern. This, I'm going to show you this. This is more for me to give me assurance that the numbers make sense. And this is based on how students had us ranked, how far away from UWG do they live? Because one of the questions I asked was around their zip code. And as you can see, the higher the rank we are, the closer the student lives to us. That makes sense. That was comforting to see. All right, these next two maps are called perceptual maps, multidimensional scaling, if you were. But in essence, the reason I did this was to give us a sense of how we are perceived in the minds of students and parents. So this one is about students. And the way to look at this is the closer we are to another school, the more similar we're seen to that school. And the farther apart we are, the more different we are perceived to be from that school for whatever reason. So please don't ask me to interpret what the X and Y axis mean, because I'm not entirely sure. Again, this is more positional. I will tell you that on the right are Alabama schools, on the left are Georgia schools, and there's a big gap between the two. So we are definitely going after 2 different markets at this point. But it's interesting. Oh, and the size of the bubble is the size of the school, or the size of the number of students that had identified that as a school. You can see that right now with students, we're perceived similarly to Valdosta State, Columbus State, close to Middle Georgia State. I'm not sure if we or you would have thought that, but that's the way students are now perceiving us. On the flip side, though, there's not much movement in this map between students and parents, with the exception of a couple of schools, one of them being West Georgia, and that parents are perceiving us more to be in line with Georgia State and Kennesaw and Georgia Southern. And I think that is telling in a way. I don't know why that is. I suspect parents maybe see us more historically how we've been perceived in the past. And we're drifting away from that universe of schools more towards the Valdosta states. Again, I don't know why that is, but it's interesting to see that. And it's something that, I'm encouraging the administration. We've got to be particularly sensitive to how we're being perceived by high school students. Okay, I want to go back now to this conjoint study. I want to give you a sense of what are driving decisions. This is from a student perspective. The variables we asked about was academic reputation, distance from home, the campus setting, and I'll show the individual attributes in the next slide. Size of the school, the cost, as you can see. Overwhelmingly, it's about academic reputation. If the school did not have a good academic reputation, then it was discounted greatly. So that had the highest utility by far. Second was cost. That's a very distant second. And then recommendation. The recommendation is from a guidance counselor or teacher. Now, I broke this up between the total population, those who were considering us and those who were not considering us. And as you can see from this chart, there really isn't much difference amongst the groups. From the parents' perspective, really, it's pretty much in the same order. More emphasis on reputation and cost. That makes sense. Less emphasis on the social life. And again, that makes sense. I don't know if the parents are all that interested in whether their students can party or not. But, you know, I wanted to lay this out for you to give you a sense. Look, it's about the reputation of the school. That's what it's ultimately about. Now, at individual levels, these are the attributes I broke out in the conjoint study. And there's limitations to conjoint and how specific and how many options you can give. And make it simple enough that they understand what they're answering. So in essence, with the academic reputation, I asked poor, okay, and good. Now, the way to look at this is the steeper the line, the more impactful it is. So, you know, a poor reputation pretty much takes you out of the decision set. An okay one might be acceptable. So the drop off between good and okay isn't nearly as steep. So the declining utility isn't as impactful. The thing I want to point out for this is there really, with the top 5 categories here, there isn't much difference between parents and their students. We saw that there was some difference here with social life. The size of school was the biggest difference, but that was such a small issue in driving decisions that it's not really worth emphasizing. One thing I do want to point out here, though, is because of the similarity between students and parents, from here on out, I'm just going to concentrate on students. So everything else that we're going to talk about is strictly from the student's perspective. Okay, now this is about what's important on the x-axis and then how, in this case, West Georgia is perceived to be performing on the y-axis here. So this is feedback from those who are not considering us. How are we doing, and is that important to them? And so, as you can see, you know, the major I want is important and we're doing okay. We're also seem to be perceived as a good value, and that's about the 4th or 5th most important issue to them. But this gives you a sense. I'm going to go into this in a lot more depth as we go into the study. But I did want to give you an overall sense of how we're being perceived by students in the marketplace right now. All right, I want to talk about some of the big issues here. And the way I'm framing this is, this is called a hierarchy of effects. And in essence, it's a good way for us to look at attitudes of potential students and where they're dropping off in this funnel. So, you know, we often talk about in marketing and advertising about building awareness, but awareness is really just the first step until somebody makes a buying decision. And so what I wanted to do here, and I think is very important and very enlightening, is, all right, let's see where we are in this funnel and where there's drop-offs. And this really gives us a sense of where we might be losing potential students. So in this first one, I didn't do an awareness question per se, but this came from other research that UCM has done. And their study suggests that the level of awareness amongst students in Alabama and Georgia range in the mid to upper 50s. And that makes sense. You know, it's really hard to build awareness, and at some point it becomes a declining utility. And there's no brand that has 100% awareness. I know Starbucks, which you would think everybody has heard of, actually only has a 93 to 95% awareness level. But that's our awareness level with our market. Now, the next step down here is knowledge, and that is, do you understand or can you define who WG is? And I base this on those questions I just showed you, the importance and how is a school performing. And one of the options was, I don't know. And so based on the I don't knows, that was about 38% on average across the questions. I'm saying there's about a 62% level of knowledge that a student knows enough to say something or feel they know who we are. Now, on the liking aspect, this is they have a positive attitude towards us. Now, I'm basing this on a consideration set. So from the UCM research, they found that 40% of the respondents that they talked to said they would consider UWG. Now, the numbers I showed you earlier was actually only 13% actually had us in their consideration set. Okay, so we asked them, of all these schools, which ones are you considering? Pick up to 5. They didn't have to pick 5, but they could pick up to 5. Only 13% had us in their decision set. Now, that's alarming. That's a drop off from 62% here to 13% here. That's a 5 to 1. We're losing 80% of the students. For whatever reason, they don't have a positive attitude towards us. It could be indifferent, but in essence, we're just not relevant. I'll use that word. We're just not really relevant to most of these students. And that's alarming. And that's something that I'll talk about later, but that needs to be addressed. But on top of that, this is a 6 to 1 drop from those who are even considering us to those who have us as their top choice. So our funnel is getting very, very narrow at this point. That we have, a good portion, 62%, who know us, but only 2% that are even considering us as their number one choice. And to take that a step further, and this is from admissions and from some numbers I derived, we lose about half of these for whatever reason. They don't get admitted, they can't make it, they can't pay, or they just melt away. Again, I'm going to delve into these numbers much deeper later in this presentation, but I wanted to lay out the situation to you and give you a sense of what's going on here. Okay, I want to take this a step further. And what I'm showing you here is this conversion rate of these schools from liking that we're in their consideration set to are we their first choice? And as you can see, we're not doing well. This conversion rate is only 15%. The best school here is UAB. So of the students that are considering them, 44%, 4 out of 9 have them as their top choice. That's an enviable place to be. Georgia State, Kennesaw, Alabama State, they're doing well in that department. If they get them in the funnel, if they get them considering, they're closing the sell in essence. They've got them as a top choice. Now you'll see here the overall average is 24%. I want you to keep that number in mind because I'm going to come back to that. But we're at 15%. And again, I think that probably explains a lot why we saw that huge drop from 2018 to 2019. That I didn't do the study then, but I suspect that that number was much higher, probably closer to the 24%. But that number has shifted towards Kennesaw State, and then Kennesaw State became the first choice. Okay, so why would a high school student choose us? And so for this portion of my presentation, I wanted to give you a sense of what's motivating, and then I want to segment the students into different groups about what's driving their interest in universities. So there's three overarching factors driving college decisions, and what I've done here is for those of you who know, I've done a factor analysis from the importance questions, and it's grouped around these three factors. The first one is reputation, and we saw that also in the conjoint. The questions that drive this are: the college has a very good academic reputation, the college has the type of major I want, the college graduates gets good jobs, and we actually graduate a high percentage of our students. Those loaded on the same factor, and that seemed to represent reputation. The second factor was what I'm calling recommendation. These four questions loaded on that. The best academic students in my high school attend the college. The college is highly regarded by my teachers, guidance counselor. I have friends attending the college, and my parents are okay with me attending the college. So we interpreted that to be some level of recommendation, either through friends or peers or teachers. And the last factor was fit. The college is in a good location for me, the college is the right size for me, and the cost of attending the college is a good value. But so in essence, we consider this as a level of fit. And so what we did then is we did a cluster analysis to get a sense of, are there groups of students and are they motivated by different things? And so we found 5 distinct segments on these 3 factors. Reputation is the x-axis, recommendation is the y, and the fit is this z-axis, if you will. And we found 5 distinct groups. So what I've done here is I've attempted to name them, and what I'm going to do is go into depth on each of these segments. So I found 5, and I went ahead and named them, and I'll explain why I gave them their names shortly. But they're enthusiasts, apprehensives, the image conscious, value seekers, and academic strivers. And these are their relative size within the marketplace. And I also wanted to give you a sense of what was driving their decisions from the conjoint. So I broke it out by these segments. Now, again, the order of these are pretty much the same across segments, but you'll notice that how impactful each of these attributes are differs, and sometimes greatly. For instance, one of the things that I said was the second most important was total net annual cost. But if you look at it, really, there's only one segment, which I'm calling the value seekers, that are really driven by cost. These 4 other segments are not finding that as important. In fact, recommendation appears to be the second most important for these segments, other than who I'm calling the value seekers. So moving along, let me describe these in detail here. And the first, I'm going to start with who I'm calling the enthusiast. And I'm calling them the enthusiasts because, in essence, if you look at this part, their average on all the questions were the highest. So I asked these questions on a scale of 1 to 6. And this segment just seemed to be enthused by everything. And that's really what led to their name that I gave them. Now, this is, if you look down here, in a very ethnically diverse group. They over-index with Black and what I'm called other. And other is just a catchphrase or a catch-all, so forgive me, but because the numbers were so small, I put them in the same bucket. But it was Pacific Islanders, Asians, Native Americans fell into that bucket. But this was a very diverse segment. Also of interest, I mean, they're 31% of the population, so this is the largest segment. They also were the ones most likely to put us in their preference set. So 16% of enthusiasts included us. The other thing is that even with that this segment on average lives the farthest from campus. Now, the next thing I wanted to look at is how do these enthusiasts view us? So we can look on the x-axis again, and this is pretty much consistent because they're the largest segment. Major is most important, getting good jobs, this is going to have a good academic reputation, the value, location, high grad, these are the five most important. And they see us doing well with the majors, the good jobs, the high graduation rate. We're underperforming here with them, but I wanted to take this a step further, and I wanted to see how we compare to their preferred school. So with that, these red dots signify how they score their preferred school versus us. If you see a red line, that means that we're underperforming their preferred school. If you see a blue line, it means we're overperforming that. And again, these are rankings on a scale of 1 to 6. Now, you can see with enthusiast, we're underperforming a lot. Now, don't get too worried because this is by far our worst performing segment. But you'll see there's huge gaps here. Now, what I find interesting, and I'll talk about this a bit later, is that this is a segment who was most likely to include us in their decision set. And yet it turns out that we're probably the worst fit for this segment. If you consider that the preferred school is closer to their ideal school, these are very big gaps to overcome. And it looks like unintentionally, no doubt, because this study wasn't done, but we've been unintentionally targeting this segment of high school graduates for whatever reason, however we're doing it. And we're just not a good fit for them, not for what they're looking for. I want to show you what their top choices are. The schools on the left here, these are their top choices. This list is not going to change that much. But you're going to see Georgia State, Kennesaw State, Georgia Southern pretty much on everyone's top choices with some variation. And like I showed you before, we were 16%. But the next chart or table I want to show you is schools with the largest share of enthusiasts. That is, of all the students who are considering, for instance, West Georgia, 40% of them are enthusiasts. And we're number one. So the biggest share of those who have us in their consideration set fall into this category where we're not a very good fit. And I think that may help explain a lot of what's going on is, again, we're talking to the wrong students. Now, I'm inferring that from this data, but that's the conclusion I'm drawing from this. But these are the other schools. Spelman, Valdosta, Kennesaw, and North Georgia are the schools that are seeing the largest, seeing those who are interested in them. All right, the next segment here, I'm calling apprehensives. I'm calling them apprehensive because they seem to be unsure about college. If you look here, again, I screened out for those who were not at least somewhat or extremely likely about attending college. The biggest share here of just somewhat likely are these apprehensives. I don't show it here, but they're also the segment who have least likely to have taken the ACT or SAT at this point. So this is a small segment. It's 5% of the population. This segment is heavily weighted towards men, as you can see here. It's also heavily weighted towards Blacks and Hispanics. This segment seems to be looking for some level of assurance and safety. They're motivated by friends who will be or already at the school. One of the questions I asked is, what percentage of the decision is yours versus your parents? They had the highest percentage, slightly, but the highest percentage of the college decision was with the parents. Now, just as an aside, it's kind of interesting that from a student's perspective, they said 70% of the decision was theirs, 30% was the parents. The parents said it was 60-40, 60 students, 40% parents. Not a huge difference, but a significant difference. Going back to this, the third point is that this segment is looking to stay close to home, and by far they wanted to stay close to home. And this is this red line identifying the utility for them. So we have this segment that doesn't seem sure they even want to go to school. And what they're looking for is just somebody to tell them, yes, it's okay. And I have some friends there. Looking at what's important to them and how they perceive us, you see the most important to them, this is their stated importance. Now it's important to note that stated importance and what drives decisions that we saw from the conjoint can sometimes differ. Now, we saw with apprehensives that their friends attending was the fourth most important, I think. But here they're saying this is the most important thing for them, is their friends attending. You also notice here that they're saying, even though the conjoint said it was driving their decisions, they say academic reputation is the least important thing to them. Also interesting in seeing how we compare to their preferred school, we're actually overperforming on almost every attribute, and even the attributes were close, which is interesting. And I don't know what to take from that, but the school, that's their number one consideration, their first choice, they don't think much of it. Okay. These are the schools they're looking at. So again, Georgia State is number one at 35%. So 35% of apprehensive have Georgia State listed. Georgia College, Alabama A&M. We're at 11% of this group. This is the schools with the largest share of apprehensives. Now remember, this is only 5% of the population. So at 9%, that's almost twice as much. The issue we're having here is just small numbers that with West Alabama, Middle Georgia, that the sample size was 10 or less with these. So we're getting into some small numbers. But in essence, if you have a sense of where they're looking at or what schools are attracting them, these are the schools. The next segment is what I'm calling the image conscious. Now, they seem to be motivated by how they appear to others. You know, we want to go to the good schools with the right major. As you can see right here, fit is not important to them at all. So they don't care if it's the right size or right location. Again, I'm drawing inferences from this, but it just seems to me it's not about fit. Is this a good fit for me? Is this look good? Does this have the right image? Social life was most important to them than any other segment on campus. This is about 19% of the population. They had a preference for mid-sized universities. This is the least diverse segment. They way over-indexed with white. They were, if you look here, they were the least likely to be considering any of the schools listed. And again, that could be because these aren't brand name schools necessarily. But when I asked them about which schools they're considering, one of the options was, I'm not considering any of these. And a quarter of the image conscious said, I'm not considering any of these schools. The other thing is they are more likely to live in Alabama, or they over-index in Alabama than any other segment. Excuse me, this is how they view UWG. Again, we do okay. The major I want is most important, and we're perceived to be performing well, good jobs, high graduation rate. Again, the reputation is below the line. This is how we're comparing to their first choice. Now, something that keeps popping up, and it's something I think is addressable, is this issue around the major I want. We always seem to be underperforming that. And aside from engineering, my understanding is we pretty much offer most, if not all, majors. So this may just simply be a perception issue. I'm not sure. There's a gap here with the academic reputation. This thing with the parents being okay may go again to this idea of it being the right image. The biggest gap is the location. As you'll see in a minute, it looks like a lot of this group comes from North Alabama, which is a few hundred miles away. But they say that's not important to them. But this is what this segment is looking like. The schools, again, Georgia State, although a smaller percentage than we've seen, 29% of them. But the schools that are over-indexed are Huntsville, North Alabama, Oglethorpe, West Alabama, Jacksonville State. 4 of those 5 schools are in Alabama. The top 2 are North Alabama and Huntsville, which leads me to think, well, tells me that a good portion of them are actually in that part of Alabama. Okay, the 4th segment here I'm calling the value seekers. And really the one thing that is driving their decision is cost. This is the most price sensitive segment. They want to stay close to home or live at home. And I'm assuming the reason they want to stay close to home is because of cost. This represents 20% of the population. And this is also, this is not a diverse segment. This over-indexes with white. This is what's important to them. And again, major I want, good value, good location, right? So we're into the fit, the right size, good jobs, and all of this. This is how we compare to their first choice. Again, the major I want always pops up. This issue around location with this segment is probably a very big issue. But in essence, we're not that far off with this segment. Again, these are the schools that they're more likely to be considering: the Georgia States, the Kennesaws, and North Georgias. Here's the interesting thing with this group is that Oglethorpe, given it's a small number, but Oglethorpe has the largest share of them considering. Now that seems very contrary to what they're telling us, is that the value is most important because this is a private school. And this could just be a matter of small numbers. But Oglethorpe is number 1, followed by Savannah State, Clayton State, and those schools are starting to make a bit more sense in that. But those are the schools. And then the last segment is what I'm calling the academic strivers. Now, this group is most motivated by the school's reputation. They're motivated by value, but they're not price sensitive, which is interesting. And I'm asking the question, is that they're looking for the best return on investment? This represents 25% of the market. They're more likely to be women. They have the highest self-reported GPA, and the group that is most likely to have taken the SAT or ACT at this point. So this is how academic strivers view us, and we're well positioned with this segment. Frankly, with the exception of the location down here, the things that are important, we're doing well in. And in fact, if you look at how we compare, with the exception of good location, the things that are important to this segment, we're doing as well or overperforming their first choice, which is encouraging. We've got the issue here about the parents okay, but still, I like our perception, our position with this segment. These are their top choices. 40% are considering Georgia State, Kennesaw State, and Georgia Southern. Again, those haven't changed much. These are the schools that are getting the largest share. So Savannah State, Troy, Spelman, UAB, Mercer. these are the schools that are getting it. Notice that we're at 23% of this segment, so we're not that far behind. I circled this 18%, and I want you to keep that 18% in mind. This is Alabama State University. I'm going to come back to that number, but I wanted to highlight why I'm using that number in a bit. But keep in mind, again, right now, 12% of this segment is considering West Georgia. 18% of them are considering Alabama State. Okay, the final part of this is the recommendations I gave to Drs. Kelly and Jinks and the rest of the administration. And so I thought I'd go ahead and share these with you. The first question that we asked is, what segments of prospective students are good fits for UWG but are not considering us? So I listed these in what I think are the most attractive order. And the first one is the one I just covered, the academic strivers. The biggest issue with this group seems to be location. That was the biggest gap. Their average distance to campus is 95.5 miles. But as you saw, we weren't that far off from their first choice. The image conscious was second. There were gaps there, but they may be manageable. I would say so the first two I would put in a tier by itself. The enthusiast I would put in a separate tier. And I have them third because they are the worst fit, based on what they're telling us. So the worst fit, but they're the ones that are considering this right now. And so I think that makes them marginally attractive. The fourth and fifth are on a tier well below everyone else. That's the value seekers and apprehensives. And the reason I have them down there is based on how important distance to campus is for value seekers. It just seems unlikely that unless they already are considering us, that we're going to get any more to consider us. Because if they're considering us, it's likely because they live close to campus already. And if they live far from campus, we're just not going to cross that hurdle, or it's just going to take too much effort to cross that hurdle with that segment. And the apprehensives are just a small, remember they're 5%, uncommitted. And I just think that, like these value seekers, there's just little room for penetration. They want to be close to home. If they come here, how engaged will they be? So that was the reasoning, and just my reasoning. So you may have a different interpretation, but my reasoning and how I ordered these segments. So I want to go to an exercise here. And my argument to the administration is, look, what we need to do is we need to pick a segment and really talk to them, target them, highlight the things that are important to them. So I'm going, because it was my first call, was the academic strivers. If we were to target academic strivers and increase their consideration set from 12 to 18%, that 18% is what Alabama State is at right now, and that's why I circled that number. And that's not a big step. I mean, from 12 to 18, remember Georgia State was at 40%. All right, so what would happen to our bottom line if we could do that? So this is the way things are right now. And I went ahead and took these percentages out to a decimal point. But right now, a 12.8% of the respondents had a positive attitude towards us. That's about 23,000 students. And that's just a rough guess. That preference set drops to 2.1. So from that 23,000, 3,800 had us as their first choice. And half of those dropped. So about 1,900 incoming students. That number, I used this number from the summer. I didn't have the latest number, which is actually 1,700. But again, this is the next generation of students, not the current crop. All right, so if we were to increase this consideration set from 12 to 18%, remember they're 25% of the market. So, 25% of 6% is 1.5, and that's why this goes from 12.8 to 14.3%. That equates to about 25,700 students. And if we just get the same conversion rates down our funnel here, that increases those who have us as their top choice to 4,200 and could increase our enrollment by 200 students to 2,100 students. Now, I understand there's assumptions in here, and this is back of the envelope math, but I wanted to give you an idea of if we could keep our conversion rates the same, what could happen. Now, take this a step farther, or step further. Remember earlier, I talked about our conversion rate from liking to preference was 15%, and that was very low. What if we could get that up to the average, which I don't think is asking too much, and I think it's very doable. If we can go from being just 15% of the population's first choice, who are considering us first choice, to 24%. So that would change the numbers. Again, we're still talking about the same number who are considering us, which is a 25,700. But this number would step up from 4,850 or from 4,200 to 4,850 students. And if we converted half of them, that would convert to 2,400 students. If you recall that chart I showed you earlier, that's where we were about 5 years ago. And the high school graduation rates or numbers were actually lower then. But I think these numbers are very doable. And that was the argument I've made to the administration and to Dr. Kelly and James, that if we started to really simply target our messaging to a segment, assuming that the other segments would find us, consider us as the same, because we really haven't been doing any targeting, but really target these academic strivers, that I think with the same resources we have today, that we can improve our numbers. And so that's the case I've been making. The next question I asked at the beginning, can we identify and target these potential students? The answer is qualified yes. I'm talking here about the difference between meaningful and actionable segmentation. I won't get into a definition because I know I'm running long on time, but let me just talk about what I'm talking about. The meaningful part is pretty much how I segmented our market, meaning that we're talking to them, the way we're dividing the market is meaningful and what motivates their decisions. And I think we can do that. Look, if we just redirect our marketing communications and understand this segment better and talk to them and highlight the things that are important to them about a university, we should do better with this. Just doing that, we should have a better sense of how to position the messaging. The second part of this is the actionable part. And in essence, can we target these students? Can I identify them in a database and send them directed mailings? I think that I can. I've done this for other companies, but I think based on the demographic data that they have and that we were able to pull from the study, that we can build some type of propensity score to indicate who's likely to fall into this segment, and give us a sense of these are the students who we should be targeting, who we should be investing our money to sending the direct mail pieces to. So to answer this question, a qualified yes, I think we can target these students. All right, so what attributes of UWG should we highlight to gain their interest? And in essence, this is the question that I asked the first day that I went to the very first enrollment committee meeting that I was assigned to. Why would a high school senior choose us? Why would someone choose us over Kennesaw State? And if we can't answer that question, then we have a problem. And frankly, we couldn't. Nobody could answer that. And we need to have an answer. Why should they come to us? Why should this one academic striver choose us over anyone else? And until we identify that and highlight that, we're going to have some issues. So look, I'd say we target one segment exclusively. And again, I'm focusing on academic strivers, but I'm So that's my recommendation. We talk to this group of students, we fashion our brand, our product, our message towards their motivations. In essence, this is who we want to become. What attributes of UWE should we highlight to gain their interest? Well, look, the academic reputation, we need to establish that. And we do have very strong programs at our university, some that are nationally recognized that we should really be highlighting. And I think that would have a halo effect. But look, our conjoints show this is overwhelmingly the biggest driver of college decisions for all segments. The gap analysis shows a perception gap between where we are and their preferred schools. One of these gaps is in the major that I want, and this is just a misperception, one that I think that can be communicated and corrected. So that's one. The second thing is with guidance counselors. Look, with the exception of the value seekers, a recommendation was the second biggest driver of behavior from the conjoint study. That they said it was relatively low importance, but the conjoint said it was, I said they're third, but actually you pull that out for the one segment, it was the second biggest driver. And, you know, we've got to do a better job improving and nurturing relationships with guidance counselors. I've talked a lot with Justin Barlow on admissions about this. And, you know, we have, in essence, reps. I don't know what they're exactly called, but in essence, reps that have territories that call on guidance counselors. The issue is that there tend to be recent graduates from West Georgia, and that's not a problem, but that we pay them so little that the churn rate is very high, that we lose half of them every year. And I almost see them as the way I personally see the publisher reps that come to campus, is that there always seems to be a different one every year. I have no relationship with them. Their recommendation or advice really has no impact on me because I don't have a level of that relationship. And I'm afraid that's what's happening with these reps and with our relationship with guidance counselors. We just do not have a relationship. It's just a perfunctory role, and that we really need to invest in these people to make this a career worth having, worth being in that position long enough to build these relationships. Some additional recommendations I made. We simply need to do further research into the target segment. If it is academics drivers, then we really need to understand them. Again, I didn't know what the segments were until I did the study, so I could only dig so deep. But if this is the direction we want to go, then we really need to understand what makes that segment tick. My second recommendation, and I understand this has been fixed, and I'll take their word for it. And this is getting a little into the weeds here, but digital tracking. Right now, we do a lot of advertising through banner ads or digitally. The problem is that when somebody clicks on an ad, we can only track them until they hit our landing page. What they do after that, we have no idea. And again, that may have changed, but when I first brought this up, when I first joined the committee, we weren't able to do it. And so we may have a great ad, we may have a bad ad. All we know is that they're getting to our landing page. We don't know if we're converting that student into an application, into getting into the funnel for admissions to nurture through until they're enrolled. We don't know. And what I told Dr. Kelly is, you know, I could put an ad up there for free beer and drive a lot of traffic to our site, but that's probably not driving enrollment. So we need to be able to track that. I mean, that's just fundamental marketing. If we're going to do digital ads and digital advertising, we've got to track that. Now, underneath that is something I'll call A/B testing. And this is a recommendation to UCM. But that is we should be running variations of ads to see which ones are getting the best click-through rates and which ones we're having the best success with. This was actually one of the big success stories from Obama's first run, is they did a lot of A/B testing to see which ads did better. We're not doing that. And so we're not testing our any ads before we put them out there. We're not testing with our current students to see if it resonates with them. And once we have them out there, we don't have variations, because, you know, when you go to a site, I go to a site, we're going to see different ads. And we can test ads and just present them to different groups randomly to see which ones get the best response rate. We should be doing that just to better use our resources. The next thing is student value. We need to understand the value of a student. And the reason I push for this is right now, we don't know how much money we should be spending to acquire a student. You know, so we don't know if we're underspending or overspending. We don't know, but if we understand the value of students or different segments of students within our campus, you know, are freshmen more valuable or less valuable than, say, graduate students? Now, I have been having conversation with John Haven, and Charles Hodges has been involved with those. So we are starting to look at that, and John Haven is collecting data on that to see if we can start to quantify that. But we need to understand, you know, we know that losing students is bad for the budget. All right, well, how much is one worth, and how much should we spend to get him or her? This informs us how much to invest to acquire a student. I got this last bullet point here because this was when I first brought this up at an enrollment committee meeting. Someone suggested that a student is worth $4,600 per semester. And that's not right. That's just not right. If that was the case, then we should give every incoming student $4,000 and be done with it. But that number is way too high. And that's why it's so important to understand exactly what that number is. The next point was Alabama. Look, the two most attractive segments over-index in Alabama. Those were the academic strivers and the image conscious. We offer in-state tuition to Alabama residents. So this is a market that we've not really tapped into that I think is rich for opportunity. And these are new students to the university system. So, you know, it's something that Dave Jinks alluded to earlier today about competing for the same students. In essence, if we were to go into Alabama, we're not stealing market share, and actually we're actually growing the university market. And, you know, I talked or worked a lot with Dr. Sethna in this. And if everyone remembers the original Go West campaign, he told me that we got a lot of pushback from the system office about that, because in essence, you know, why were we spending money on marketing and why were we concerned about share? And he had to explain to them what that was about. But I think we would get a lot less resistance if we were to go into this market, which seems to have attractive segments for us. The other thing is this ongoing attitudinal tracking study that we have to continuously monitor this. 10 years ago, we needed to improve awareness, and that's when we did the Go West campaign. But today, our emphasis needs to be further down this funnel. We need to continuously measure the attitudes of high school students, freshmen through seniors, on attitudes towards UWG and competing schools. We've got to be in front of these attitudinal changes. If we had been, we would have seen that drop off 2 years ago coming 2 years in advance. We would have seen a shift in attitude away from us and towards Kennesaw State. And so we've got to stay on top of this. And we have to realize that this is an entirely new universe of potential students every 4 years. And so we've got to continuously monitor the attitudes towards us and to other schools, so we can address these and try to change these before we lose 400 students. then I'll say the bottom of this funnel becomes the top of the admissions office funnel. So once they make contact with us, it turns over to them. And then my final slide and my final recommendation is I really strongly encourage Dr. Kelly to establish the position of a brand manager, someone whose responsibility is to manage our brand, to track these attitudinal changes. We want to shepherd potential students through the funnel. We want to take them from awareness down to where they're reaching out to admissions and starting the enrollment process. We need to have someone oversee our market research and make sure these studies are coordinated. Because what I'm finding is UCM does their studies, admissions do their studies, and there's not a lot of overlap. And there's a lot of duplication of effort. We need someone to own this target market to make sure that we're always staying on brand. And we've got to build our brand equity. We've got to have it to the point where people want to come to us, that we're not a second or third choice. So that's what I have. Thank you, Dan. And I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Well, very good. Thank you, David. I found a lot of that quite fascinating. We'll open it up to questions. And maybe since I'm chairing the meeting, I get to start with my own question if I have one. So my first question for you, David, is I found it interesting that you asked the enrollment management team, why would an academic striver prefer West Georgia over Kennesaw State? And people struggle to answer that question. And I guess after listening to the last 10 minutes of your presentation, which is all about marketing, I still am wondering what sort of answer we would give to that question. So what are your thoughts as to how we can best, what do you think is the best answer to that question?
Well, I'll give you an opinion, and I don't know if my opinion's worth any more than anyone else's on this call. One, we have some programs that I think we could emphasize, and I think there becomes a halo effect that if we're perceived to be outstanding in one program, it radiates down to the others. So I think that's one. I think that we have a unique campus experience that we can highlight that helps differentiate us from a Kennesaw State or a Georgia State, which seems to be our, I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry I talked for so long, but we seem to be losing most of our share to those two schools. Excuse me. So I think that's something. But I think the key thing is for us to agree, administration and faculty to agree, what is that factor? I don't have an answer. I have opinions, but I don't have an answer yet.
In looking at academic excellence and how students defined it, did you see any evidence that you're looking at the type of students who attended a school as a measure of academic excellence? That is, if the average SAT score at a particular school was 1200, they would just perceive it as being more academically excellent than a school where the average SAT score was 1100.
Right. I did not ask that per se. I asked what their scores were, and honestly, the only way I phrased that question was on a scale of 1 to 6, how would we rank on academic reputation, in essence? But as you saw, for the most part, it wasn't bad. So we seem to be, at least right now, decently positioned as having an academic reputation. But I did not go any further in trying to quantify that.
Yeah. Shelley has a question. Shelley, the floor is yours.
David, it seemed that location was always something that we were lowest on. Do you think if we marketed more about our closeness to Atlanta rather than market that we're rural, which is, I think, the perception, we do a little better?
Yeah, I don't, I'm going to say I don't know to a lot of questions I think I'm going to get. I don't really know. Listen, what I do know is that location, even though there was a gap there, for most segments, it wasn't important. And I think most students expect to travel some. There were two distinct segments, right? Those value seekers and the apprehensives, that location was important, even though it didn't necessarily pop as being that important in the conjoint study where they were actually choosing based on other attributes. So I don't know. I think so. I don't somewhat point this out, but I think Kennesaw State is only what, 10 or 15 miles closer to Atlanta than we are.
And the traffic certainly isn't as bad from Atlanta to here than it
That's
is
for
to
sure.
Kennesaw.
Yes. So to answer that question, I think that might be along the lines of cup holders in a car, that location is important, but it's not the reason I'm selecting the school.
If I may follow up, some of us, I think, our disciplines, the proximity to Atlanta is important.
Sure.
If I could say about like the film and theater and entertainment industry,
Sure, makes sense.
I'd say other corporation, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones, and so I just wonder if it would be good for UCM or admissions to at least talk with us about how important that is.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we are uniquely positioned to understand what is important to our students and what they know, and I think we should be consulted on that. I really do, and that's a point I've made before. Is that, look, how you're selling the university is impactful, not just to the students, but to the faculty and to our programs. And that we should have some input on that. And I believe that. And I think to your point, you're exactly right. It's true with the business school as well. If you want a job, the jobs are in Atlanta.
Thank you. This was really great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Yoli.
Did you notice a difference in terms of how they rated the school's location between students who were from Carroll County or the adjacent counties versus those that were further out? So I can understand why when you're talking to students from Alabama, for instance, they might have said location was a problem. Did you see a difference in response the closer the prospective student was to UWG?
Yeah, that was one of the earlier things I showed is that we saw that the closer the student was to UWG, the more likely we were to be ranked higher in their preference set. And as they got farther away, we were lower and lower. So that obviously has an impact. And again, that might be a factor of who we're been targeting. And remember that this was more about trying to find segments of students who weren't considering us. And so and in the study that I did, I asked everyone to evaluate West Georgia, but the only other school I had them evaluate was their top choice. So I can't really tell you what their thoughts were on any other schools, except for those small numbers. And again, that was a very biased sample of those who are already considering that school as their top choice. So it was their top choice, but everyone evaluated West Georgia. So I can't give you any more specifics other than those for West Georgia. But to to the point is that the closer they lived to West Georgia, the higher we were in their decision set.
Yeah, well, thanks. So we have a couple of hands, I guess. Emily has been trying to raise her hand for a while. So I'll go to Emily, and then after that, Jonathan. Emily?
Thank you so much. I really, this presentation was fascinating and I learned so much and I loved all the graphs. I think everyone in sociology will be excited about graphs and just in general. I had a couple quick questions. Either you or Dan mentioned that some of this study has already impacted how we were doing the marketing and the admissions.
Yeah.
Does anyone know the specific, like the ways this has, like the things that have changed as a result of the study?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, until Wednesday, I didn't know it had any impact. But I did reach out to the admissions office and Justin Barlow and asked him. So it has affected his thinking in that he's targeting a segment. However, he's not using what I did. And the reason is sound because he had to put together a plan and implement something soon. And for us to be able to use what I've done, it would take time to score their database and identify students and do additional research so we can message. So I understand that. So we went with a third party that firm that does this type of study on a national basis. They have their own segments that they look at the market through, which isn't tailored to us. But he's been using that. So to an extent, it's influenced the way that he's not just doing a blanket to everyone, but really trying to target the messaging to a certain group of students.
Okay. And then my second question, very quickly, I was wondering if you think it would be possible to code students who do in fact enroll based on their segment, whether it's your segment or Justin's segment, so we can track them over time and also understand the retention?
Yes, and that's something we've talked about. So with what Justin is doing now, the firm he's working with actually does that.
Okay.
And they're going to score the, because Justin buys names from the SAT and ACT. I propose doing that. We would have to, in essence, develop a propensity model and try to score each student. But then, in essence, that's what this firm is doing as well. But yes, I'm a firm believer of tracking and monitoring and adjusting as we go forward, because until we do that, we really don't know if it's working. So yes, that's an excellent point, and it's something I'm advocating.
Okay, well, that is great. And again, thank you so much. This was just so exciting and interesting.
Well, thank you.
Jonathan.
Hey, so the question I had is a bit about the discussion on location earlier, but more generally too. Thinking about location, the discussion was coming up about job opportunities related to specific fields. Is there some understanding of why they ranked these different things as important or not important? So, or what they were valuing in that. So if they were saying that the location for West Georgia was bad, why did they consider that? Is it because they view it as further out away from, a metropolitan area where there's more jobs, or tied to a specific field's concerns? Those kinds of follow-up questions.
Sure. I did not ask that question specifically. And with the thing with research is that research always leads to more questions rather than anything. And so, I didn't know where that was going to lead. So I didn't know that would be a question I would need to ask. What we do know is, one, location wasn't that important in picking a school. So even though people had opinions about it, it wasn't really the decision-making factor, except with a couple of segments. I did ask in the conjoint about the setting, whether it be in urban, suburban, or rural school. And that showed some difference, and I could bring that chart back up, but it wasn't much different. There was some slight preference. I think rural was the lowest, but again, the marginal difference just wasn't that great. But I think it went suburban, urban, rural, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the best answer I have.
Jill Drake, I think you have a comment or question.
Yes, thank you. I very much appreciated the presentation. I wasn't in the meeting where it was shared, and you have brought up several things, or given data and credence to several aspects of our recruitment. especially the thing about the relationship with the guidance counselors that's come up quite a bit. But I wondered not only about looking internally and trying to resolve this problem, but looking externally. For example, some of the dip that we saw may have been related to Kennesaw removing the residency requirement. So, you know, we also need to know what our competitors are doing. And, you know, also this year without the SAT and ACTs being required, again, students may be getting into institutions that they ordinarily would not get into. I didn't hear you speak to that a lot, but I'd like to know your opinion given the amount of research you've done.
Sure. And actually, I've talked to Justin quite a bit about that as well. What impact the test or the test waivers are having? I'm going to defer to Justin on this, but in essence, he thinks there's students are trading up from his perspective, and that kind of makes sense to me. That if I don't have that hurdle, perhaps I'm more likely to get into a UGA or a Georgia Tech, and it goes up the ladder. And apparently, where he's seeing the biggest decline in enrollment are at the community colleges and the lower. I don't know if it's fair to call lower tier, but these lower tier universities in the system seem to be getting the brunt of the enrollment declines. And so there are schools that are suffering a lot more than we are. On the other hand, Kennesaw State, Georgia State, and again, I'm getting this from Justin, they've seen record enrollments. So that seems to be the trend there. Your other question, the issue with Kennesaw and the dorms. So what we're not sure about is whether, and maybe somebody else is, but what I'm not sure of, because I've heard two different versions of this, is Kennesaw waive the residency requirement because enrollment went up, or they waived the residency requirement first and then enrollment went up. I don't know which one came first. They both make sense. I mean, if your enrollment goes up that much, you don't have the housing. I could see where that was needed to do that. So I've heard both. I've heard both versions. I don't know the right answer to Kennesaw and the housing issue. But if you guys don't know, the Kennesaw has waived that requirement to live on campus.
Marjorie, you have a question, I think.
Yes, thank you, David. Really interesting. One of the questions I've had for a couple of years now is the impact that dual enrollment is making at our university and the amount of resources that are being given to try to bring these students in. Since I had a child who did dual enrollment at UWG, I saw an enormous amount of what appeared to be effort and swag and so forth to try to gain the interest of those students. I don't know if that played any role or if you had that question anywhere on your questionnaire, but I wonder if it's one of those things we should be considering when we look at enrollment, is how much emphasis is put on different groups, including that one.
Yeah, well, the specific answer to your question is yes, we should be. And actually, in some of my discussions with John Haven, we've talked about that specifically. About the research I did not look at dual enrollment, so I did not ask that question. And again, it was a random sample. So I have no idea if they were enrolled in it. And again, keep in mind that my look was those who weren't even considering us. I would hope that dual enrollment students were at least considering us. I don't know. It's interesting. I had a conversation earlier this morning with another faculty member about that and how his daughter hasn't been getting anything from West Georgia as a dual enrolled student. So, but the important thing to know is once I gave this presentation, I've really not been involved in anything with the administration. So I don't know I just don't know what's going on. I've reached out a time and I must admit Justin Marlowe has been great in sharing information with me when I reached out to him. But no, I've not been pulled into any of this. So I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you more.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Bruce.
Thanks, Dan. David, excellent job. Of course, I knew that you would because I've seen some of this before. So let me lock in on your recommendation for academic strivers. If that is the key segment, then shouldn't we be doing a little more of in-depth conversation with them and maybe inviting them to campus, talking with them and getting to understand that segment better? So, and bear with me for a moment. So would this also correspond to some of our initiatives to exceptional students like honor students and of course the previous advanced academy? Is that something that that correlates well with the academic strivers or not?
Yeah, look, I mean, this group did the best on their exams. They did the best, have the best reported GPAs. Yeah, and one of my recommendations is we've got to investigate this group more, because again, we didn't know what we were going to find with this first wave of research. And if we're going to target a group, we really need to understand them and what really motivates them, because right now this is just a superficial understanding. So yes, I wholeheartedly endorse that. I would like to go around the state and do focus groups and really talk to these students and understand and what's important and what's their trigger, and understand how should we be talking to them. Does the Go West campaign resonate with this segment, for instance? It may or may not. I mean, what we know is that the segment that seems to be considering us is a segment that appears to be the worst fit. So for whatever reason, we've been talking to them enough to be considered, even though compared to their first choice, we pale in comparison. We just don't know. That's the thing. We just don't know. But these are things we need to investigate. It could just be simple things like a color scheme or something that might resonate more with a group. We don't know. And until we do have that level of conversation with them, we're just guessing.
But let me put this discussion a little further, because this requires a sort of a soul-searching exercise. In that, these are good students. These are students that we'd like to have, and it's this tussle in internal. That's why I call it a soul-searching exercise. A tussle between whether West Georgia should go with the academic excellent students, such as honor students and so on. But the pushback is that we don't want to be considered an elitist institution. So I'm simply saying that there are two ways of looking at this. Obviously, I absolutely understand the need to attract these honors, and as I said in the past, academy students. But the criticism was at that time, and still probably might be, that that's an elitist approach. So we have to struggle with that very fundamental question.
Fair enough. Wanting to get the top students, I don't think is elitist. And remember, in targeting and looking at those numbers, we're not hoping to get all of them, right? We just want to more concentrate and get a slightly higher percentage of them.
I agree.
Because there's a good percentage of them. And they said, well, again, this is representing a quarter of the graduating students, right? So this is a big portion, and this is how they self-identify. But I don't think it's unfair to do that. And again, it's more or less talking to them. I don't think we're necessarily discounting or dissuading anyone else, but we're being more focused in how we present ourselves and communicate. And I think that's what's important, is just instead of doing a shotgun approach, being a bit more precise in our targeting. Right now, we're not. I mean, we're not, unless something's changed, we're not being precise in our targeting. It's more, we're reaching out to everyone and hoping someone comes in. And as you know, as we're seeing, we're just not becoming relevant anymore. And that's why we have such a low percentage that we're even their first choice. And that's a disturbing trend. And that's a trend that we really need to turn around back to where it was back when we had other presidents and such.
One last thing.
I'm kidding.
Shooting out an idea. There have been times in the past that we have actually worked actively on guidance counselors by inviting them to on-campus or off-campus locations and having a star speaker that would appeal to them, not necessarily something, it doesn't have to be a West Georgia person, but it might be, but something that would make their lives easier. So, you know, the classic seminar kind of thing, we're going to give you a seminar on what you want and maybe give you a meal or something like that. And then we'll put in a plug for West Georgia. So that's a strategy that we have done successfully in the past.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Susanna, I think you have some questions here.
I came in late because I was in another meeting that you were supposed to be in, David. So
I asked off. I got permission.
Okay. I'm just kidding. I was thinking about the question of location and what does location mean. So, like, as far as I understood, you measure it like by zip code and distance. But did you ask like people? Because to me, like the location might be it's not that it is far, it's that I don't want to live in Carrollton because there's nothing to do if I'm a 20-year-old and there's nothing to do. If you're a 20-year-old, I would have been very unhappy at a place like this when I was 20 because there's nothing to do. It's like, there's like, if you watch the movies at the movie theater, that's it. There's like, what else do you do? There are no bars. There's like no dancing. There's no clubs. There's no, or another thought that comes to me is that it might be perceived as not diverse and problematic to come live in Carrollton, especially, you know, if you are like Hispanic or Black. And then you've seen some of the interaction that the campus police has with the students of, not the campus police, but the Carrollton police, you know, and then, you know, your friends tell you, just don't go there because it's not going to be good for you. But I don't know, did you ask questions around how attractive is Carrollton as a location as opposed to how far it is?
No, I did not, Susanna. It was simply where we perceived to be a good location. However, that was self-defined. So I asked, you know, and again, this was a blanket statement for all schools. You know, is a school for you? Is it in a good location? And the other one was about what the campus setting. In the demographic section, we asked zip codes. And so that allowed us to put distance from campus. But as far as specific questions about Carrollton, no. And that would be good for follow-up, you know, with if we were to go after these academics, drivers, or whomever, to get the idea as, you know, is that going to be an obstacle for us or not?
I guess we could also ask like current students, how do they feel about the location in terms of like things to do, or like current freshmen maybe. But I don't know, because right now it's like if we ask people now, it's gonna be even worse than before because of the coronavirus. So like a year ago, you could have gone to the movies. Now the movie theater is closed.
Right.
So.
No, that's an excellent point, and it is important. I didn't point this out, but I did this survey over the summer, so it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So I don't know how, if and how that skewed any results that we got.
Okay, thank you. This is really, like, really, really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna.
Ann Richards, I think you have a question or comment. Ann, if you want to make it.
Okay, I got it. Sorry. I had two issues. I remember one time sitting in the faculty senate when a presentation took place, I think aimed at graduate students. And when an image came across the screen and started talking about our quote, world-class nightlife, everybody burst into laughter because what they were panning was the city of Atlanta rather than Carrollton. So that's a whole separate issue. But then earlier in this meeting, I noticed that we would have dropped our GPA requirements in certain programs, and there were reasons given for that. But I wonder if we're trying to attract academic strivers, if that might make a difference that is not helpful to us.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, we're not targeting academic strivers right now. That was my recommendation, and I hope we do in the future. But that's not where we're at yet. So, and again, I don't know how that plays with the GPA requirements for programs. So I'm sorry, again, a lot of my answers are I don't know.
That's okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yvonne, I think you have a question or comment.
Yes, I enjoyed very much the presentation. I learned a lot. And if we are looking to perhaps, or as a recommendation to target academic strivers, and these academic strivers, there's also a correlation with what they're looking for. They're looking for academic reputation. We can perhaps do a better job at improving the perception students, parents have of us. And when you look at reputation, one of the things that you look for example, is program quality, individual programs. We've mentioned that. The research strength, the publications of the faculty, the resources, etc. And although we have a long way to go, definitely a long way to go, we do have quite a bit of individuals, publications, accomplishments that we can start bragging. And so that also goes into how we present ourselves and how our administrators represent us, the faculty, in our accomplishments. And like I said, there's always room for improvement, but we need to perhaps start changing that perception also of our academic reputation. Showcase it, show what we have, show brag. Don't talk about the Carrollton that has nothing to do, but talk about the Carrollton that's 40 minutes away from Atlanta, an incredible city with great theater, with great music, with great possibilities. So also how we represent ourselves, I think, can have an impact if we want to go after those academic strivers.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any further questions. I do have one additional clarifying question. I know I've taken the floor maybe more than my share this time, but when we're talking about academic strivers, it struck me when you were showing the list of the schools that they wanted to go to, and it's similar to the schools that other people wanted to go to versus the schools that they actually ended up choosing. The schools that they actually ended up choosing were actually quite comparable to us, in some cases even what I would view as a slightly lower academic reputation. So the impression that I got from that is that when we're talking about academic strivers, we're not necessarily talking about valedictorians. We're talking about people that simply want a good education or the best education that they can get with the money that they have and the opportunities that they have. So I guess my question is that a fair assessment? And then was there any data that you gathered that would indicate what percentage of these academic strivers actually might be people who would fall into our logical student bracket? That is, regional comprehensive, like Kennesaw, like UWG is going to have certain minimum standard and not necessarily a maximum, but we're not getting that many students who are 4.0 high school students or above, unlike UGA. So did you gather any data that actually might indicate what percentage of that group would be a logical fit academically in terms of credentials for the West Georgia Regional Comprehensive University market?
Yeah, so let me try to answer that with what I did ask. So remember that this segment was 25% of the market. Obviously, 25% of the market is not valedictorian. So to put in your perspective, yeah, it's a good swap. It's more about that they're working hard and what they're looking to do, and that's why I call them strivers. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking 19 or 20% of them were not considering any of the schools on that list. So again, there was an option when you're ranking schools, which ones are you considering? One option was I'm not considering any of these. I'm thinking, and I can go back and look, but I think about 20% of them said I wasn't considering any of them, which means 80% were considering schools within that universe. And that universe were schools that at least our admissions department believe are our competitors, are comparable schools, a little above, a little below, but within our within our realm. So I think that suggests there's a pretty good chunk. And again, we don't need them all. We just need to increase our percentages of them enough to get us back to that 400, 500 students that we've lost over the years. And there's thousands of them, right? I guess there would be 25,000 of them. Because there's 100,000 high school graduates and 25% of 100,000 is 25. So that's where I came up with that. So again, they're there. We're not trying to get them all. We're trying to get a slightly larger percentage. And I think even with the resources we have, if we just talk to them and target them, we could do that. I don't think those numbers that I laid out are unrealistic at all.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is very good. Any other questions or comments?
Dan, we got a comment that was messaged to me. It says, I don't know when this will be convenient to mention, but we could also mention that we have the Greenbelt and lots of outdoor options, which other universities lack.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot more that could be said about Carrollton. I've been in the strategic planning data review meetings this week, and it's striking that there's a fair amount from the data that's of relevance, but one thing that was striking when students talked about location, the number one concern, so these were students who are currently here who responded to the survey about the strategic plan this fall. And the number one thing that they said about the community was they placed a high priority on safety. It seemed like that was their number one concern, and that's an issue, I guess, that could be addressed. So I don't know if that's necessarily in the equation for students in talking about location, but at least for the students who chose UWG, who are currently here, that seems to be at the top of their list of concerns regarding the Carrollton location. Anything else? Well, thank you, David. This was
Thank you for letting me do this.
I really enjoyed it. I know other people did from the comments section and from people who've expressed their thoughts. It's clear this really resonated with a lot of people. It's something I think that is going to provoke a lot of continued thought, continued conversation. So I'm glad we had the chance to hear this. Well, if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
Do we need to second? A second.
Okay. I think we're ready to adjourn. So thank you. We'll see you next month.